Hi everybody. I wanted to come online and do a hopefully quick little video about our first textbook assignment or assignment number 2, which you are researching a brain injury. There's many different types of injuries that you can research. I've listed some here in the assignment that you can see. Traumatic brain injury, closed head injury, stroke, aphasia. Those are just a couple of examples. As I mentioned last week, just to give a quick overview, this is probably what you saw when you first came online, kind of the basic overview of the assignment. To slow you guys down, last week I added in the key concepts that I'm going to be looking for within your paper. So for this assignment, one thing that happens is people focus on the brain injury itself and not the psychobiological aspects of the brain. So when you do that, these are the key concepts. For example, many people research stroke, which is absolutely fine. Stroke is a great head injury to research. There's lots of research out there. There's lots of information for you to use. Where people go wrong is they talk about the stroke itself, what a stroke is, the different types of stroke, what causes a stroke. That's not what I want you to focus on. It will be important probably to give a paragraph of what your brain injury is. For example, many people may not know what aphasia is, or maybe you're going to look at dyspraxia. Those types of things you may want to just give a quick paragraph as to what that is. You should be able to talk about where in the brain, correlate your injury to various brain structures. Where in the brain does this occur? So when we're thinking about aphasia, when we're thinking about dyspraxia, what lobe is it located in? And is there a specific area that is impacted? And what goes on within that area? Thinking about the neurotransmitters. How does it impact other brain structures? For example, thinking of a stroke again, thinking about that motor cortex, which is a very small area of our brain. But when that is damaged, what happens to other functions of the brain? Has anybody ever been injured, hurt their back, sprained their ankle? Think about that pain that you're in and think about what your body goes through in order to recover. But you may also notice as well that when you are injured or you have a lot of pain, you start to forget things. Your memory isn't as good. You are short-tempered, especially if you're in pain over a long period of time. You're more tired, and not all of that is due to the healing process. So that is one thing that you want to look at, that emotional state. What happens otherwise to a person? So a person who has a stroke, we know that motor cortex is also impacted, but why is it so impacted, and why is that small area of the brain take up so much energy in order for us to still function and move? You can discuss how the injury impacts the specialized functions, the psychological functions, as well as the lobes within the brain. Again, kind of think about movement, think about emotion, feeling, physiology. Thinking about how we respond to and receive sensory information. And then what occurs with the brain when interventions or treatment is implemented. And think about that video about neuroplasticity. So one thing that I try to do is when you guys do sit through these videos, I try to give you I don't want to say inside information, but I try to give you some helpful things to go with. So one of the helpful things that you can really think outside the box. You can be very inside the box and do well on this assignment. As I said, stroke is something that's very widely researched. You can get more information than you need to do a very good job on this assignment. But you may want to think outside the box. For example, I'll be posting a video about anxiety in the brain. I'm sorry, not anxiety in the brain, but chronic stress and trauma in the brain. which is fairly new research. Probably people have heard about trauma-informed schools, trauma-sensitive schools, the role that trauma, stress, and anxiety play. And this video is a short video, but it really talks about what happens in the brain. That is an excellent video that could get you started, that if you wanted to address anxiety, chronic stress, we will be discussing it in more detail later in the semester. But as you're thinking about, if stress is something that we all deal with, and if it's something you especially deal with and it turns into anxiety or other mental health disorders, you can definitely pick a theme as you go through this semester and work with that. So anxiety, PTSD, chronic stress, those two can be considered head injuries and brain injuries because, as you hopefully will see from that video, there are changes within the brain and chemical changes in the brain. And there's areas of the brain that are damaged when somebody suffers from chronic stress. So again, you'll get a lot of new research around chronic stress and trauma and the impact it had on the brain, but that is something that you can definitely work with. So the first video that first website is from the TBI website, the Traumatic Brain Injury website, and up here is the link if you wanted to use it. And this I just feel is a really great website because it shows, it's not so interactive per se, but it really gives all of the different areas of the brain and gives you a brief overview of the function. So for example, this would be kind of the outside side view. Broca's area is one area that happens to be highlighted right now. It's in the frontal lobe of the cortex, as you can see. So, when you talk about these different lobes, I'm just trying to, there we go, the frontal lobe. It's important for the production of written and spoken language. So say you talk about somebody who has a stroke and all of a sudden they can't talk. So we would assume that the stroke took place in the frontal lobe, most specifically the Broca's area. And you can kind of go through and see the different areas. The cerebrum, the whole brain. The parietal lobe, if we click on that, you can see over here, this has a lot to do with that movement and sense of touch. This also is important for sensory integration. And so if we think about where this is in our head, thinking about movement and whatnot, it takes up the sides and it takes up the back. A lot of this is, thinking about head injuries, what goes on. This is our olfactory system, which is vision. It's on the, let's see here, it's on the temporal lobe. And right there is the temporal lobe if we click on it. And what's interesting, people who have these studies now done, and there's actually some great, I hate to use the word research, but people who suffer from seizures, they can actually have their temporal lobe removed and still function, which I was like, oh my goodness, you're removing the temporal lobe. Think about speech, memory, and hearing. I don't think they take out the whole thing, but even in New Hampshire and Boston and Massachusetts, they're doing some great research around this area of the brain with some specific kinds of seizures. Wernicke's area, it's on the left side of the temporal lobe. We're over here. And this is more understanding language. Broca's area is back there. Wernicke's area is over here. So as you're going through, so you could talk very basic about stroke, and you can talk about the left side of the brain and the right side of the brain. As we can see here, you can kind of move this around. You can be very basic. Absolutely, you can be basic. But the more you go into this, the more research you contain, the better understanding you'll have with the brain overall. We also can look at that inside of the brain. So, the hypothalamus. When we talk about the limbic system, this may be an area that if you are interested in chronic stress and anxiety, this is an area that you'll want to research. This also it talks about the limbic system over here not being well understood, but there's a lot of research around this about emotions and our pleasure system. Maybe another thing that you want to research is a child who's born addicted to drugs, or we have a huge drug epidemic. What is going on with the brainstem? What's going on with the cerebellum? And kind of the cerebrum overall when we have medications and drug addiction going on. The corpus callosum, the band of fibers that goes around the whole brain. So yeah, you can definitely see where these go. You can definitely look at the visual anatomy, kind of that inside. So we can see here that these are our eyeballs. That would be our nose sticking out, and how this all works as the system. So it gives a little bit about the inside. How the eyes collect data and light. So then it's converted in the retina, I thought they had the retina here. I guess they don't have the retina here. And the electrical signal that goes on to get the information back here to the back area of the brain. And it really does make a straight shot, believe it or not, into the back of our brain. Let's see here, motility, which is kind of those eye movements, and there's the optic nerve that I was looking for before. So it really talks about, if you want to talk about some injuries to the eye and how that impacts the brain. And then again, we have this kind of overall left and right brain. So if you were studying strokes and you wanted to do just, if there's a stroke on the right side of the brain here, that it impacts the left side of the body. Okay, but what other functions, human functions, is impacted? Same thing for the left side of the brain. And where do those take place? So for example, if we were to look at music and art and imagination, maybe look a little bit more about where in the brain those takes in. We talked a little bit about language. So thinking about the Wernicke's area and the Broca's area, think about what these areas of the brain have to do when people talk about language, or even reading, awareness of time, objectivity. So that's kind of a really great area to kind of, when you're talking about the brain and wanting to know more information, it can really give you. And it does talk about what TBIs are. So, if you want to talk a little bit about what a TBI is, this website does not give you kind of that information about neurotransmitters and what happens kind of chemically in the brain. So another fun website that I personally like is brainfacts.org. This website, I feel, just gives so much great information, and this may be one that you want to use throughout the semester. For example, I'm just going to go back to the home page here. I clicked on something earlier. So, it talks about when we get into development and, part of the brain, we're going to have to think about those early stages of the brain. And these are usually short videos for the most part. Next assignment, when we talk about perception, thinking about things that go on into here, we're going to do a activity, and one of our assignments relates kind of vision, touch, taste, relating taste and smell together. Emotion, stress, and anxiety. So, say you want to look about stress. So it talks more in the brain, that psychological and psychobiological perspective. Do feelings actually hurt? Talks about unconditional love and looks at the brains of a mother and child and what those can teach us. Let's see here. Going to diseases, the mental health, Alzheimer's, addiction, as we talked about, epilepsy, neurodegenerative disorders, neurological disorders, even therapies, we discussed that too. Here we go with a lot about the body systems, the anatomy, kind of the cells and circuits. So you want to have maybe a better understanding about how our cells and the impact early development can have on it. So, definitely something you can think about, if you happen to look at if you happen to look at something that maybe is behavioral, some people look at autism. I hate to consider that a brain injury. But if you want to think of it as a neural development, something that, occurs in the brain, I'm definitely open to that. But this can definitely talk about, how neurons work, and how neurons are born and how it all works. And this is a great one that explains the electrical circuits. um, there are some definitely hands-on activities with these, so this is more about kind of arts in the brain, tech in the brain, and then some things that if you like research a lot and you want to look at what's going on in research for the brain, you can definitely look at that too. So as I said, this is the assignment in and of itself. You can definitely take one of my ideas. You can definitely take it further if you have something else. I definitely keep an open mind about this and what people want to look at. If you find that somebody else has researched something that you're going to research, have at it, because I don't care if I have 20 people researching the same thing. You're all going to have a different perspective. You're all going to say something different. You're all going to use different research. So I have no problem with people doing the same topics. So with that being said, hopefully this kind of explained the brain a little bit, gave you some ideas of places that you can research. Ways that you can really expand upon your thinking about what's going on in the brain, and where that's located, and can definitely, as I said, give you some information that you can carry throughout the semester. So thank you for listening. I hope you guys are all doing well, and post any questions or comments that you have. Bye.